Good evening and welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and now powered by our first sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You all have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us and help support the movement, help fund the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you today. I am your host, Royce White, and I am here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, for episode number 43. I believe it's 43. Let's double check that. I'm pretty sure it's 43. You can tell that I don't really script these things out that well, but we are now on number 44, episode 44. The day is Wednesday, May 10th, year of our Lord 2023. If you didn't get a chance, go back and watch Monday. I thought it was a great episode. If you didn't get a chance, go back and watch last Thursday and Friday's episode with Tim Gordon and then Greg Nelson. We have a number of great guests lined up in the future. I have feelers out with a number of people. We're hoping to get those interviews locked in and bring more incredible family and friends content to you. We may have to go off schedule to accommodate the interviews that we do and try and get the content to you as fast and as best as possible. We are up on all audio platforms. Please remember, we are up on all audio platforms, and our audio platforms, by the way, have not been as censorship driven as our video big tech counterparts, such as YouTube, who took down our Alex Jones episode and even took down, I think it was episode 34, where I talked about the Federal Reserve and the PBS Frontline documentary, The Age of Easy Money and the Power of the Fed. That episode was also taken down, but it is available on Rumble. I believe the Alex Jones episode is available on Rumble, and they are both available on all the audio platforms, including Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and Google Podcasts and iHeartRadio. So check us out on all the audio platforms. We are getting our BitChute caught up. We are getting our InfoWars or Band.video channel caught up to date. And we are building our Odyssey channel this weekend. So we're going to expand, as well as the Patreon platform coming in the next couple of weeks, just fine tuning it, making sure everything is right to give you the best experience possible. And we're going to be on Locals, Subscribe Star, and Donor Box to begin with. And I think Locals has a pretty cool video platform as well. So we're going to maybe have some additional special content on Locals. So stay tuned for that. If you didn't know, I have a Substack. You can find my Substack, Royce White's official Substack, at substack.com. Go subscribe to the Substack. It's free. It's free. And then in the near future, we may ask for $1 or so. You know, we got a pretty good following there on the Substack, and I think people really enjoy the writing. I think a lot of people are so spread out across this huge digital digital landscape that you'll have people who are following the podcast only by audio. Then you'll have people who are following the podcast by video only. And then, those two groups of people won't even know or be familiar with the things that you've written. So I thought today I'd just give you guys a little heads up that I do have a Substack, and I think that you will enjoy the writing. Writing's a completely different medium than speaking and doing a commentator or commentary work. So check out the Substack if you get a chance. I think you'll enjoy some of that content as well. Aside from that, the other housekeeping is I hope you all enjoyed Professor Penn's podcast yesterday. We will be starting to use my Getter channel to stream content. We want to thank the War Room Posse for continuing to stream Please Call Me Crazy on their channel on Monday, Wednesday, Friday nights. But I am planning on starting an additional podcast, The Royce White Show, over on my Royce White USA YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Royce White USA. And that'll be one time a week, only on Saturday nights is the plan. So we want to thank everybody over there with the War Room Posse, the great Maureen Bannon, Grace Chong, the great Steve Bannon, and everybody else behind the scenes who helps the War Room machine do what it does. And we're very thankful for their continued support and to allow us to stream to our Getter audience and the War Room Posse. Besides that, I just want to say to start out today, I appreciate everybody who watches. I saw some of the comments and somebody said, "Man, it just feels like you're scolding us." I'm speaking to the urgency of the times. If it doesn't apply to you, then it doesn't apply to you. If you feel this immediate sense of defensiveness or uncomfortability with the tone of the language, um, might actually apply to you. It's a good indicator that the content applies to you. I always I like to go back and reference sports because I think sports gives us great insights into some of these interpersonal dynamics between people and groups of people and communities. When the coach, when I was playing basketball, even now, still to this day, if we're in a game and we're not boxing out in the game, and then we're losing on the glass, um, but respectively, or as an individual player, I have 8 rebounds during the at the time, um, and the coach calls a timeout and brings us all in and hammers on us that we need to rebound. I don't take personal offense to that. Number one, because I know in my mind, without even having to mention it, that I am doing exactly what I need to be doing in that particular respect, and I know that the coach is trying to address the entire team, and that it will apply to who it applies to. Secondly, I won't take offense to it because ultimately, uh, no matter how I feel about my own individual contribution to the team, the fact of the matter is that as a team, we're not getting the job done, and we need to adopt, embrace uh, a very sport like, a very team like, a very team driven uh, culture in the conservative movement, in the America First movement, in the Patriot movement, in the Freedom movement. All of these movements need to, in the Christian movement, we need to adopt a very team like, very team driven culture. And in that team driven culture, we need to be very team oriented. America's the land of the free, the land of opportunity for the individual, and that's great. But that opportunity is slowly slipping away, and we're going to need a team effort like maybe never before in American history to rally and to save this nation. So when I'm speaking to the entire audience, I'm not speaking just to you. I think that would go without saying, but I wanted to address that. And then the other thing that people say is, well, it's just so, sometimes it's so negative. It's like we live in negative times. I think the who you should be mad at, who you should be upset with, who you should feel uncomfortable with are the people who try to make it seem as though everything is absolutely normal. These are the people you should have hostility towards. These are the people you should have an animus towards. These are the people you should have an aversion towards. I remember when I was coming up listening to Alex Jones, I never got the sense, I never got tired. I patently disagree with people who say that they can only take so much of Alex Jones, right? People who are very close to me who say they can only take so much of Alex Jones. I mean, that's a clear sign that you can only take so much of the truth, right? That you have a threshold for the truth and the direness of the situation. And I think ultimately what we have to swallow is that the establishment's greatest advantage against us, the establishment's greatest accomplishment so far, is to uh, disguise corruption as completely normal. To describe, I mean, to disguise wickedness as being completely normal and creating this sort of creeping normalcy of corruption and wickedness. And those who have this urgent sense and this dire sense of opposition to it, they should be commended. And I'm not speaking about myself. I'm speaking about all the patriots out there who have put in, 10, 15, 20, 30, a lifelong of years to fight back against this corruption. They should be commended. The great Rush Limbaugh, right? I used to like Rush Limbaugh. I mean, I love Rush Limbaugh. Rest in peace to the great Rush Limbaugh. He was way ahead of his time. He was, right down the pipe on a lot of these issues. Disagree with him on some things, but I disagree with everybody on some things. I disagree with Steve on some things. I disagree with Alex on some things. Disagreement is healthy, is good. It allows us to be able to sort out the ideas. The problem we're having is that the main concentration of our disagreement right now is juxtaposed to our opposition, which is completely and utterly irrational, illogical, and incoherent. That's the problem we're having. Genuine disagreement, we should invite. Um, but the disagreements we're having now are not genuine. And my episode today is about artificial intelligence and the agreements and disagreements that are happening around artificial intelligence today. Um, I read recently that artificial intelligence is now capable of lying. And this is a herald of the end. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know how else to convey the seriousness of this. I don't know how else to raise the alarm any more than anybody else has. And I hope that the force multiplied power of the many voices speaking at once will have a profound and disproportionate impact on the final result. But ultimately, I just don't think people quite understand the seriousness with which AI undermines our humanity. Let's go past, fundamental American ideas like freedom and justice and truth. AI undermines our fundamental humanity. And now, for some strange, again, I go back to my own story and saying, hey, the human mind, the human mind, the human condition, consciousness itself, the psychology, um, mental health as a way to define that sort of domain of topics. Mental health is the greatest social issue we face, and I was talking about for people dealing with people. In 2013, this sort of AI, this artificial intelligence wave or theory was still very theoretical. It's not that it wasn't that it's not that it wasn't on its way, but it wasn't in our face. Hell, social media was barely up and off the ground yet in 2013, 10 years ago. This is when I first came onto the scene and made my bones in fighting against the corporate media around this mental health issue. And it's partly why I was so um, so easily able to transition to a more populist minded political worldview, and ultimately supporting Donald Trump because um, I saw the contradiction well before this most current wave of political polarity began. And if you remember, in 2012, 13, we were in the middle of Obama's the golden age of Obama, right? Widely throughout the country, and he had many critics. But if you were jacked into the mainstream media in any way, which many people were back then, um, we didn't have such a political divide. At least it didn't look like it on paper. Remember Obama blew Mitt Romney out of the water, which is a thing that we should note and a herald of what happens when you run Democrat light Republicans against staunch communist Democrats. You never win. In fact, you get your ass handed to you. It's a recent history we need to be reminded of and keep in the forefront of our thinking as we go forward politically. But anyway, I was this corporate media and the contradiction of it was so obvious to me as things unrolled with BLM, and then I saw Jordan Peterson go through his situation in Canada, and then it was the George Floyd situation. Not to mention within there, Julian Assange, Snowden, and some other geopolitical, controversial things, and then the George Floyd, and then COVID, and then since COVID, it's just been a wrecking ball of just you know a wrecking ball of global politics, a wrecking ball of globalism. Let's just call it what it is. But it was easy for me to see through. And like one of the blatant ways was how the left had fought me. The left, when I say the left, I mean the liberal leaning mainstream media industrial complex, had fought me in my attempt to highlight the NBA for its inability or unwillingness to address the human condition. And professional sports as an entire industry was sort of unwilling to address the human condition by way of the mental health topic. And it was easy to see why, or at the time it seemed like it was easy to see why. And everybody made an excuse for them as to why, even the liberals, and even the leftists, even they made an excuse for them. Oh, it's a business. This is capitalism. The NBA's not responsible for the human condition. It's free market enterprise. It's a job. They're your employer. They're not your family. They're not your doctor. They're not your therapist, and blah, 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 blah. Time and time again, they found a workaround to not hold the NBA accountable for how hypocritical and contradictory they were in their moral, ethical, and values based promotion. And it's funny that now today we see the fruit of that impulse, and the fruit of that impulse is mental health is being used now to justify any number of social agendas. And any number of social agendas are going to ride into the town square on the horseback of wellness and mindfulness, right? And maybe most of all, artificial intelligence, right? Because the real impulse behind artificial intelligence is one, industrialization, and two, that the human mind has a bandwidth problem. But the human mind only has a bandwidth problem based on our modern culture, our modern society's expectations of human productivity, and the expectation or the margin of error, the margin for error in that expectation around any number of things. It could be policing, it could be accounting, it could be the outcomes of criminal court cases, it could be anything. We at least promote that the margin of error we've displayed thus far is inadequate. That that humans just have too many errors, right? We don't have the bandwidth to reach the capacity of civil society that we would like to reach. The capacity for let's say precision, the capacity for precision and productivity that we would like to reach in our society. And that's just bullshit. You know, those two are just the way that artificial intelligence is promoted. Okay, there's the way they promote it, and then there's what it really is. And what it really is we went through three iterations of slavery. The second iteration, people didn't even know they were in. Right, slavery gets abolished in the 1800s, 1860s, and we go through 100-year period where people were slowly but surely turned into wage slaves. In fact, you could argue, and I love that Professor Penn brought this to my attention, and now that I think about it, it makes perfect sense that I've had an intuition towards the Crown and their business model and the prevailing business model and culture and temperament and overall Finocchio brand coming out of a post-Enlightenment Europe. Um, he brought this to my attention, and I think it's profound that Great Britain, the UK, always brags about being the first nation to abolish slavery. They were also the first nation to institute central banking, a Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve came into being under monarch Europe. And it's funny that they even to this day get to walk around as some symbol of social justice because they were the first nation to Western nation. They were the first European country. They were the first modern empire to abolish slavery. But even right there is a double cross and triple cross. I mean, I say things like double cross, triple cross, three card Monty, and people think that it's just for fun or it's just, a turn of phrase. But really, this is exactly what they're doing. And I think most of all, people have trouble grasping the breadth of corruption and wickedness because they think something highly complex is going on when really the answer is hidden right in front of you. And that's maybe a magician's greatest skill is to do the trick right in front of your face, and you're expecting something elaborate and complex when really it's very simple. um, Actually, when you see a trick, it looks simple, but when you actually get into the mechanics of a trick, if you go behind the scenes and have a magician or have ever seen a magician walk through the steps of a trick, it's almost comical how simple it really is once you see it. And that's why I use the term three card Monty. And the three card Monty is really simple. And it's what's funny about three card Monty. I use the example on the Las Vegas Strip is you'll have a guy out there, hustling, doing the three card Monty, and you'll have people walk up who are actually in on the hustle, and they'll let people win who are in on the hustle to draw more people in to give you the illusion that you can win. And then even they'll even let some random people who aren't in on the trick win to create the illusion that you can actually win. But over the course of the day, just like in the casinos in Vegas that are also doing a three card Monty, the house always wins. And the street hustlers who do three card Monty, they always win. Um, it's the same thing with our establishment, but we don't view our politics, we don't view our modern culture, we don't view media, we don't view all of these institutions as cheap parlor tricks. We view them through their illustrious history of gravitas, right? But nothing could be further from the truth, and we can go right back to the abolition of slavery from the crown, and think about it. It costs money, and as this is a primary example, I think it costs money to keep slaves, chattel slaves. It's expensive. And even if it's not expensive, it's a unique type of expense, right? And so most people will embrace that abolishing slavery was better for the slaves because of the physical implications of bondage slavery. And those are true. But the devil hides the lie within the truth, right? Um, the biggest lies hide behind the best lies hide behind the biggest truths, right? Something to that effect. I had to go back and remember how I wrote that in my book, but that's kind of the idea is that the devil isn't beholden to the rules of engagement that we all are as people who strive to be civil and honest and just and Christ-like. The devil doesn't really have that limitation. He doesn't play by the rules. And so in not playing by the rules, he's completely satisfied by using the truth as a means to forward his agenda. And I think and we have to go right back to slavery. We have to go right back to the inflection points throughout history. And I think it's not by coincidence that slavery and the abolishment of slavery or the abolishment of slavery from the crown being used as this hallmark of social justice. Now it's social justice. Back then it was, uh, you know, well, we could say it was democracy or humanity or civility or whatever you want to call it. Um, it was used as a promotion, as a promotion of governance and our global elites and our financial elites having some type of moral advancement. But we have to look at the reality, and the reality is that they were turned they were transferred from bondage slaves to wage slaves. I mean, they almost got you immediately. And the question is, well, you got to think. I mean, let's just ask ourselves the question: do we think that these very brilliant individuals who set up a system, a scam, as widespread and successful, like central banking, do we think they didn't understand the overall implications of wage slavery? Or do we think that wage slavery was right there in the forefront of their mind when they wrote and went to execute that plan? And if we make that connection, do we think that it wasn't intentional to take us away from bondage slavery and into wage slavery? And if we accept that, then the wage slavery portion of our recent history and our three slave and our three slave eras, the wage slave portion of that history may have been decided well before we ever freed the first slaves, whether it be here in the United States or whether it was there in Great Britain. And I brought it up to circle back to speaking about the Civil War, in that both sides, sure, the Union may have wanted to free the slaves. Sure, Abraham Lincoln may have believed in freeing the slaves on a constitutional basis or a spiritual basis. But the people who funded the Union, the people who surrounded Abraham Lincoln, very well could have desired to move the American business model as a whole, a new expanded federal government that would be the result of the union's efforts, a new expanded federal government taking us from bondage slavery, which is kind of niche, to a more wholesale approach of wage slavery, right? And it happened in sequences. Slavery ends, and you have this industrial revolution, and then you have central banking, and then you have World War I, and then you have women go into the workplace in World War II, and then you have an entire restructuring of the global economy in about a 70-year period. Now, for a lot of people, it's like 70 years seems like a long time. Like, even if you just stop to think about it now, think about when the slaves were freed in 1860, and think about when World War II ended about 70 years later. That seems like a really long time for most people. And I think our public school system kind of truncates our history into these eras. They even give them these little, funny names. If you remember in school, when you're taught about the history of America, they name each decade, right? So they kind of truncate your mind around decades of politics and geopolitics. Well, really, I mean, that's the biggest fugazi border in all of human existence. Some arbitrary naming of a decade of time is like, no, the tens and the 20s and the late 1800s are 1 to 2 generations. And a generation, by my count, a generation is every 15 to 18 years, because a newborn child comes into reproductive age, and sometimes, typically, they have children in their early 20s. This wasn't usually the case. People waited a little bit longer, but in some cases they had children even younger back then. So a generation is every 15 to 20 years. Well, the tens and the 20s is one generation. I mean, it's just one generation. And the 1880s and the 1890s, that's another generation. So in a 40-year span, that's 2 generations. Well, 2 generations sounds like a long time, but it's not. I mean, it's just two people being born. Hell, if you're a fruitful enough young man, you could have children in 2 generations, right? A child in 2 different generations, by societal's timeline. Now, in familial bracketology, familial structure, they'll be in the same generation from a family standpoint. But I mean, over the course of history, it's just 1 generation or 2 generations of kids, right? My mother and her younger sister are that way. My mother had me when she was 23. I'm 32, so she's 55. But her younger sister, my grandfather's other daughter, is only 3 years older than me, right? So imagine what can be done, what type of intergenerational, psychological, monetary, geopolitical scheming and execution can take place if we look at time in that way. And if we look at time in that way, what happens with the abolishment of slavery in Europe and the abolishment of slavery here in the States, and then the industrialization, and then a world war, and then a global economic restructuring, we are looking at one of the greatest executed plans in human history. And even if the plan wasn't, even if it wasn't planned, even if it wasn't agreed upon, even if it wasn't schemed up, it's been so successful. It's so deeply entrenched that if it's not a conspiracy, it is the single greatest coincidence of circumstance and effective circumstance in human history by a long shot. Okay, if you look at the culmination of all of these circumstances into what we face right now, you couldn't even write it up. I mean, it'd be hard for most people to even write up such a scam. Okay, and now, and I bring that up because, again, to go back to the topic of the day, artificial intelligence, computer technology is the third era of slavery, the third era of modern slavery. You had bondage slavery, you had the Middle Passages, you had the slave trade, which came from Europe. There were other places that participated in slavery, don't get me wrong. And we should be very clear that there were white slaves here in America and there were black slave owners of black slaves here in America. Doesn't absolve anyone of slavery, especially not this nation as a nation. But we should mention that that's a reality, and that there were slaves in many parts of the world. And if you're a Christian, like I am, then you remember the most historic, maybe the most historic uh, slave era was the Hebrews there in Egypt, and in that captivity that that left Egypt through the grace of God and the help of God. And that's what the Jews practice today in Passover and so on and so forth. It's a great cultural tradition to remember that God helped the Hebrews escape from captivity under a tyrannical Pharaoh. So, but from the modern era, you had bondage slavery. Then you had 100-year period of wage slavery, really more like 70, 80 years of wage slavery. And as soon as they turned on the computer technology, as soon as computers went commercial, we entered into digital slavery. And digital slavery is going to culminate in artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence eventually will be the death of humanity. And it's not so much, it people have to understand the fundamental mechanisms at work here. Okay, there's God and there's God's plan, and then there's the way that God designed the universe, and then there's the way that God designed people. And there's a reason why the prescriptions of the Judeo-Christian worldview or a biblical worldview describe life as it's supposed to be lived the way that it does, because the people who wrote it, these people were um, these people were humans. They were faithful. They believed they believed in their own divinity. I use that term, with some precaution, but they believed in their own divinity in so much as they were divinely chosen and gifted life and all of the other very unique things that human beings have been afforded through the grace of God. So they believed in themselves, right? And they believed in their existence, and they believed in their survival as a species, as a people, as a tribe, so on and so forth. And in that, you see a rejection of any sort of anti-human behavior. Um, the artificial intelligence movement is explicitly anti-human, and it goes down to the fundamentals of a human society. It's not just oh, the robots are going to wake up one day, decide that they can lie, which has happened already, decide that they're hostile towards a figure like Jesus Christ, which has happened already, decide that humans overall are kind of this plague to the planet, and that they that the world itself, or the universe maybe, will be much better, much much more peaceful without all of these humans on it, which has been prophesized already by many of our greatest sci-fi films. And you know, these things all eventually end in the destruction of humanity in a more overt way, right? But there's going to be a slow death of humanity in the face of artificial intelligence too, and it comes back to convenience. It will slowly but surely become more convenient not to have children. The more yuppie, posh, postmodern society that we built, and artificial intelligence is just going to kick that into overdrive. For all of the criticisms of lust, for all of the criticisms of promiscuity, for all of the criticisms of the way the human reproductive system tempts us into sin, one thing that you can say that was a grand design of the one true living God is that we all have this sort of fundamental and primal instinct or impulse to procreate, even if on accident. I am a sinner of that nature, was, but having children out of wedlock. But I will say that even if on accident, and I've said this on the show before, but I'll reiterate it here. I think the whole um, marriage, wedlock, children within wedlock, deadbeat children, illegitimate bastard children is one of the greatest scams that the establishment has played on us through the anti-family court system against 501c3 Christian culture, Christian communities that have very poor leadership and discernment and guidance around such issues. And it was the predicate for abortion, number one, but then it's going to be the predicate for a sort of laissez-faire, posh, aristocratic view towards childbearing altogether. And you see that, right? You see that in our society creeping up in this sort of opulent society. It's like, why have too many children? That's not necessary. That's just a burden. That's just a cost, another cost. It's a very Marxist view of procreation and reproduction. And that's what we're going to start to see here now, right? That's going to be the real herald of artificial intelligence. And sometimes when I always say sometimes people say things. Sometimes people say things or do things that they are not yet ready to fully articulate, or that they can't articulate in all of the with the clarity that the future generations will see with ease. And the people who have predicted this kind of dystopian warfare between us and the machines may very well have been on to something that was really more symbolic. And when I mean more symbolic is like, why do the machines need to kill us? We have an anti-human, we have a growing anti-human sentiment toward ourselves. All the artificial intelligence has to do for us to kill ourselves is to provide that level of convenience and eventually that level of distraction. All they have to do is eliminate the desire or impulse to procreate, to have sex, to have physical, natural, organic sex. I mean, we as Christians, we never could have imagined when we were thinking about the rules. Um, or let's not say when we were thinking about the rules because we didn't think up the rules, but when we were looking at the rules, when we were, going through the pages and deciding, what things do I need to speak on in the sermon today from this 5,000-year-old oral and written tradition. We never thought that the day would come where we would have to ask ourselves as a species, which is better, promiscuous organic sex or virtual reality sex, right? I mean, these are things we must weigh out now. I'm just being frank. I mean, I'm just being honest. You know, it used to be that people would need to have kids because their children would help them labor. Their children, more children would help you, be able to labor the farm or till the land or trade in the market or whatever it is. Whatever it is that you were doing in terms of income and revenue stream, having extra people and extra bodies on hand helped you do that. The same model that well before there was slavery, organized systemic slavery, um, before that model was even created, this sort of human, pattern is what informed slavery, right? It's like, oh, the more people we have, the easier it is to grow food, right? Because it takes work to grow food. It doesn't take money. It actually takes work. It takes human energy. Now, the humans need to get energy by eating. And so if you can't eat properly, then it's very hard to have the energy to do anything, much less very time intensive endeavor like agriculture. But this informed the whole slavery model. Well, now that whole sort of model is being radically restructured. It's being changed, fundamentally being changed. And it started with industrialization. It started with the machines themselves. And it's not by accident that after that, once slavery was abolished, you saw the beginning or the uptick in industrialization, right? So like you were a slave to a plantation, you were a farmer, but maybe you were a slave. By the way, there were, at any one time, there were 3 million to 4 million slaves in America. I think at the time when the slaves were freed, there were like 4 million slaves in America. That's a big number because there's nowhere near 400 million people living here then. Population has just boomed over the last hundred or so years. And that's not a mistake either. Industrialization, agriculture, the advancement of technology allowed the population to boom. And now the same technocrats are basically calling in the receipts and saying it was our ingenuity and innovation and our, our insight that allowed all of you people to be here anyway. I mean, you could see where in the psychotic mind of these technology driven tyrants that the entire endeavor of technology and the population size today is just a result of a means to an end for a dream that technology had at its birth. Right? Tracking, you follow? That without technology, without agriculture, without industrialization, without modern medicine, that the population could have never grown to the size anyway. So you people are all extras. You people are really useless. You all know Harari, useless people, useless, meaningless people. We're all just extras. I mean, this is the type of stuff that you start to think. This is the type of stuff that you can start to justify when you don't believe in God. And this is my warning to my libertarian brothers and sisters out there: be cautious, because this faithless based worldview, this hyper political worldview, is one that can get you in trouble really quick. But so the technology really afforded us. It did afford us the ability for the population to grow, and in that way, uh, our family sizes did not. The size of our individual families didn't grow. Isn't that strange? I mean, it's strange that the population continues to grow, but our individual family sizes continues to shrink down here in the West. Now you can talk about immigration and people keep coming in through our border. Yeah, that's true too. And that's going to be a big problem as well. And now we have our mortal enemy, the Chinese, sending migrants and immigrants in through the Mexico border, which is one of the most scary things I think I've ever heard. If it wasn't just funny sounding that Chinese immigrants are coming through Mexico. Um, People would say that xenophobic or racist, but it is what it is, and it's funny to me. Fuck you. Um, our family sizes continue to shrink, and there seems to be all these societal expectations on childbearing and when to have a family, and none of it considers the dangers and the threats of artificial intelligence. And none of it considers the dangers and the threats of technology or the technocrats or the tyrants that execute an agenda that's been on for a long time. And the agenda of technology in the end game seems very clear. If you look at it from a macroeconomic and political standpoint, from a state standpoint, from a global social engineering standpoint, the point of technology was always to service the consumption of energy, right? It was always to service the consumption of energy into what is needed. And ultimately, I mean, you see, like there's physical distinctions between people. There's physical distinctions in our country, in our nation that I don't even think people really can identify. Like your coastal elites, your Barack Obamas who have a $20 million home in Martha's Vineyard, who tell you that the climate is in crisis and that the sea levels are rising, but yet he buys a $20 million property on oceanfront, on an oceanfront, right? Buys a $20 million home on oceanfront property. Little confused by that. Little conspicuous to say the least. The climate's in such trouble in any year now. I mean, any year now, the climate crisis could really come down hard on us. But hey, it's not soon enough that a $20 million investment in a home on the beachfront would be any real risk to me whatsoever. But you know that those kind of people live so far from the metropolitan. And even when they're in the metropolitan areas, even when they're in the big cities, even if they have a $10 million condo in the city, they live so far removed from you, the worker drone, right? You're just a little worker. You're just a little worker. You go to the phone company, you answer the calls for people who need to return their Saks Fifth, belt buckle that was defective, or you turn the lights on of the city, or you clean the shit from the sewers, or you come and you take out the trash. You're a trash man, or you come, you put out a fire, or you scoop somebody's brains up, and you're a cop. And every time one of these wayward, faithless, demonic people just decides to shoot a bunch of human beings because, hey, fuck it, it's Tuesday. You come and scoop their brains up, and you have to be there, the first responder to deal with the families, and you people who man the phones, you people who man or woman the phones, who are the coroners or the dispatchers, you have to call the families and so on and so forth. You people are all workers. You're all workers. You're all slaves. Right? You're all slaves, and there's nothing wrong with a hard day's work. Let's be clear. There's nothing wrong with a hard day's work, and there's even nothing wrong with a few people having a disproportionate success due to their role in any domain of society. Right? I don't care what it is. I mean, if you invent something, you should reap the benefits of that invention. The question is to what degree? And the bigger question is, the more important question is, to what end? That's the most important question. See, the Marxists get caught up in the degree, right? They say your wealth is so disproportionate, to such degree, to degree X, to degree Y, whatever the case may be. Your success is your success is disproportionate to an unacceptable degree. But it's not the degree of your success that concerns me. It's the it's the it's the end game that concerns me. And with artificial intelligence, I think we have clearly identified the end game. I think we have clearly identified the end game of industrialization and technology. And even in that, for that matter, military and global financial institutions. We have identified the end game. The end game is to get technology to a place where humans are no longer necessary. And it's not even like that's a conspiracy theory. This is in the white papers of what they themselves admit. I talked to Carrie Lake on the phone last week, and she's out there on the trail, fighting for this country, fighting for her people there in Arizona, fighting for all of us. And I sent her the Yuval Noah Harari video where he talks about people being useless, and asking the interviewer or whoever he was sitting there with, what are we going to do with all these useless people, right? They'll have food. Food won't be the problem. The problem will be boredom. And how can we live with the boredom of our subjects and serfs and slaves? How can we, the technocratic overlords, stomach this radical boredom of our serfs and slaves and subjects? And what he's really saying there is not that the boredom of the slaves or the lack of meaning, the uselessness of the slaves is really what bothers him, or what he's afraid of. What he's really afraid of is that when people get too bored, when people become meaningless and feel useless, they lose their mind, and when they lose their mind, violence comes shortly after. And that's what our elites are really afraid of. And that's what your police are intended to curb. That's what your police and your military is intended to control. It's intended to um, it's intended to create the immediate threat of violent physical death, to the decay and destruction of your mind and your willingness or desire to play within the rules of the system. I love the scene in between in the Matrix and Morpheus and Neo, and he's telling him he's got to jump across, that he can make the jump in the building to the other side to the building, and he goes, but before you do it, you have to free your mind. You have to free your mind of everything, of fear, of doubt, of all of it. You got to let it go. Such a profound film, still to this day, and I think it's fitting, it's relevant to the conversation here, because obviously the driving antagonist in the Matrix movie was an artificial intelligent being, and a kind of hive of artificial intelligence there in the machine city. And machines had basically, taken over a post-apocalyptic or post-war society. If you go back to the first Matrix, you remember that when Morpheus explained to Neo how the world, how this whole thing happened, it started with a nuclear holocaust, started with a nuclear war. Really, it was a nuclear war between the machines and the humans. And Morpheus says, we don't know who fired the first shot, right? We don't know who fired the first missile. And we're getting to that place now. I mean, think about the security, think about the general security implications of artificial intelligence from a global military standpoint. The United Nations itself, as a global international peacekeeping organization, peacekeeping organization, should be fundamentally opposed to artificial intelligence in every way. It's a matter of global security. Because if artificial intelligence gets to a certain place, they could either A, springboard a nuclear conflict, by hacking and kind of creating a false flag of one nation versus another, or, and like in the Matrix motif, they can just commandeer the weapon systems of whatever nation they need to and wage their own war against us. And you got to think, like, how smart do you have to be to weigh out that scenario? I don't think you have to be really smart at all. I mean, they kind of, we've had our intelligence bastardized and watered down and neutered for so many generations in this country that people seem to think these ideas are way above their own consideration. And I'll see that a lot in the comments. People go, man, sometimes you talk over my head. It's like, is it really over your head? I mean, a computer with its own ability to think, with it to be able to think on its own, um, already basically jacked into the mainframe of the number of number of digital places that it would need to hack in order to pull something like that off. Uh, that's dangerous, right? I mean, everybody understands that basic concept. I think that's why The Matrix was such a good movie. Maybe people were just jerking off at the slow motion and bullet dodging, but I think the narrative was resonated as well. And I think that's true of most things. And I think that's another way where the devil is hidden a great lie under hidden a big lie under a great truth, right? It's kind of hidden the lies within the truth. And the truth is that we do like very immediate, visceral stimuli. We like that. We like the narrative. We like action movies because we like the high, the high, what do they call it? The high frequency, fast pace, action cut kind of stimulus drive. But also, people are very driven by narratives and very driven by story and very driven by archetype and very driven by cultural norm and cultural practice. And I think artificial intelligence is meant to strip us of that as well. And that's what the algorithm is meant to slowly bring about. Now you're going to get your stories in even shorter format. Well, one thing about getting your stories in a much shorter time span is the nuance of the details matter. Right? And the things that are missed, the things that fall through the cracks in that shortened form of content are important. And they're especially important when your society hits a critical point. When your society is in a dire situation, when your society is faced with the proposition of complete and utter annihilation by their own hand, the details are very, very important. The nuance is very, very important. But slowly but surely, we reject the nuance. We reject the details. We don't want the details. Give us a 15-second reel. Maybe what most of all has happened is that artificial intelligence and technology in general has been identified as Satan as the Achilles heel of humanity, and even more importantly, of the human spirit. That technology and science and our own desire to be God, our own desire to be the God of our own existence, is the Achilles heel of us all. And it goes right back to Adam and Eve. And this is the profundity of the story, whether you believe that Adam and Eve's story is literal or not, whether you believe any story in the Bible is literal or not, the cautions and warnings in the Bible are so relevant and so spot on. It'd be scary if Adam and Eve weren't a literal story, because whoever was writing that, whoever wrote these stories that weren't literal, are so spot on in relevance, in potency. These people were straight hitters. I mean, these people were oracles. These people might actually be, if you won't acknowledge the divinity of a one true living God and the authorship of the Holy Spirit over the Bible itself, then you have to start to, then you would, in that case, you would have to start to allocate individual divinity to the writers of the Bible itself. Because that's how prophetic they have been. And no greater example than artificial intelligence. No greater example than technology becoming the ace in the hole for Satan. And that's what has happened. I mean, that's really what we're looking at now is Satan has identified that by way of technology, all of us will choose our own damnation in a way that we can't help. We can't even bring ourselves to spend enough time to listen and deal with the things that we would need to deal with in order to fight back. The high is too good. The material high is too good. The material high could only be acquired through a society protected by machines, by advanced technological advancements and weaponry. Right. That's the only type of society that could even be introduced to this kind of prosperity that allows them to constantly re-engage and get off on the material high that we've developed today. So you see the two go hand in hand. Radical materialism and security. Security comes first, and then radical materialism comes after, and both of them provide this volley of convenience. Don't have to get my own food. Don't have to worry about any predators. Don't have to worry about the elements. Don't have to worry about a people and a land that I know not of. All I need to worry about is surviving, not making mistakes, not making fatal mistakes. If I don't make any fatal mistakes, I'll probably live to be 70. How much can I get till I'm 70? How many things can I get until I'm 70 years old? Right? It's pretty satanic. I mean, it's satanic. It's right down to the bone satanic. Because radical materialism is satanic. And I don't know if you were able to catch my reel that I posted on Getter and on Twitter and on Instagram over the last few days, but it's a video of me and my son, my oldest son, who's 12 years old. I'm coaching his team. I've talked about that in the last couple of podcasts. That's been fun. But it's me and my oldest son at the championship game of the Big Three last summer, and he's walking out with a shirt that says Jesus is King. And every weekend at the Big Three, I had these themed T-shirts, and we've done all kinds of T-shirts. There's Who Killed JFK? 63 Million Babies. Gain of Function. United States of the Federal Reserve. Steve Bannon is innocent. Alex Jones was right. Who killed Gaddafi? Um, the list goes on and on and on. We do a special shirt every weekend. And by the way, thelastrenaissance.com will be the home of that content and that merchandise come this summer, about 6 weeks from now, June 25th. If you go there on June 25th, that weekend, the shirt and the theme of that weekend will be available there, as well as this last season's shirts and merchandise. But anyway, in the championship game, we went with Jesus is King. And the championship game was in Atlanta, Georgia. So, some significance there because Atlanta has certainly become the mecca of black bourgeoisie, LGBTQ, radical leftist, materialist, Marxist, globalist sellouts. And I'm not talking about all the people in Atlanta. There's some great people in Atlanta. There's some great Christians in Atlanta who love God, but culturally, the significance in Atlanta has become that it is politically driven by black bourgeoisie sellouts who have aligned themselves with the military and the military industrial complex insofar that it's aligned with all the other industrial complexes, but mainly the mainstream media industrial complex and the Democrat Party platform and its puppets. So, we come out in the arena with the Jesus is King shirt, and nobody's clapping. Nobody's clapping. Sold out arena. Everybody can see it. When you come out of that arena, they show it on the big screen. And that's why I'm there walking right behind my son like a lion, right? And he's just got the happiest, innocent look on his face when you watch the video. He's just so happy to be there with Dad. He's so happy to be there around NBA legends like Charles Oakley and Cuttino Mobley, and he got to meet Ice Cube, and he grew to have a really good relationship with the other players on our team like Glenn Rice Jr. and T.J. Klein, who's the son of Nancy Lieberman and Coach Nancy, and And so he's just having a ball, right? He's just happy to be with dad, and he loves Jesus, and he prays every morning, and he prays every night before he goes to bed. And he just thought it was the coolest thing to be able to come out on the court and walk around on the court and profess his love for Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And nobody clapped. Nobody clapped. There wasn't an ovation. Let us know where we were. I knew beforehand, but I also knew that he will always be able to remember that moment, and he will always have that moment. So far as we have power and video for people to be able to view video, right? Power for people to be able to view video. He will always have that moment. That moment will go down in history, whether the powers that be like it or not. And that's been the profundity of Jesus Christ since his time on this earth, and since his sacrifice for our sins, is that no matter how much the powers that be try to purge Jesus Christ from our society, they have been unsuccessful in doing so, and they will continue to be unsuccessful in doing so. But that was a great moment. And so, uh, you know, when we came out and when we were done, we had lost that game, and one person came up to me in the back, one person, and he was quiet. This guy I knew, good guy. He came up to me in the back and he goes, "You know what? You guys lost that game, but you won the weekend." He said, "The real victory was little man coming out with that shirt that said Jesus is King." And it dawned on me in that moment. It dawned on me. It dawned on me that there is hope. There is hope, even if it's a fool's hope, even if it's just a sliver of hope. There is hope. But in order for us to reach out and grab that hope and use that hope, we have to become comfortable with the gravity of things we're going to have to fight against. And artificial intelligence cannot be seen in this movement as an inevitability. We do not need artificial intelligence. We do not need artificial intelligence. We don't need artificial intelligence to fight against the Chinese. We don't need artificial intelligence to fight against the Russians. We don't need artificial intelligence to fight against anyone. And even more importantly, when we go back and we really iron out and put the proper guardrails around artificial intelligence, which I think we should do, and I think if Donald Trump is elected, he will do. We must demand he do. We must demand that he put guardrails back around artificial intelligence, because it's it's probably the greatest existential threat to the entire human species. But once we do that, and I believe that he will do that, I believe we will win in 24, barring a very, very blatant cheat. Right? Let's see if Biden can even make it through the primary with RFK running against him. Right? Because I'd vote for. I mean, I like Bobby Kennedy. I like him a lot, and you see in the last couple of weeks, he was a climate change guy. He's now come out and blew the whistle on the climate change thing and changed his position on that, and I respect that. You can change your position, right? I'm on the record, speaking, I wouldn't say speaking against, but criticizing Donald Trump. Yeah, and I still have criticisms of Donald Trump. But we as Christians have to, never preclude the possibility of miracles, and that's what I'll say as a prescription to the greater conversation we're having today, and the overall prospect of us winning or losing in the end, which as Christians know we'll win in the end because God will win in the end. That's already set in stone. But when these small battles in between time, will we win? We can win, right? We can win. Um, but we can speak out. Speaking out against somebody is not a problem. We can't preclude the possibility of miracles, but we also shouldn't preclude the possibility of redemption, and not only the redemption of people who we see having done wrong, and now we agree with them on some things, so they're redeemed, but the redemption of our own lack of insight. And I had a lack of insight. I was wrong about Donald Trump in many ways. I can honestly say that now. I was wrong about him in many ways. And I'm 32. At 20 at 28, 27, I didn't have a firm grasp on all of the aspects of things that I do now. Was still well read, still understood the general premise, still fought against the corporate media. So I always liked Donald Trump for that reason alone. And I love when Donald looked at the what do they call it, the proctor of the debate with him and Hillary, and he was asked a question about his taxes, and he goes, "Yeah, I use the tax break. Yeah, I use the tax code, and so do all of her donors." That's probably one of the best Donald Trump moments of all time, because it was so honest, it was so genuine, and I liked him from that moment. But I also just like the fact that he came out and said, "Yeah, this entire DC elite are all just swamp creatures." I'm just, you know, he's got a Type A personality. If you're alpha male, you can't help but listen to him and the way that he discusses things and have a respect and admiration for the authenticity of it. But there were things I disagree with him on. But we should allow for people to redeem themselves, and most of all, us individually. We should look in the mirror, and have that sense of redemption. And I brought that up just because, I like Bobby Kennedy. Yeah, yeah. Mea culpa, right? I was wrong about climate change. Yeah, I think it's a scam now. Now, under further review, I think this is actually a fucking scam. Good for him. Good for him. We should invite that. We should invite more people. Truth commissions. We should invite more people to come forward and say that they've had a change of heart and tell us the role that they played in the whole deal. Truth commissions, right? That would be good. We need the truth commissions, because if we don't have the truth commissions, the level of desperation that the inevitable populist uprising in this country will yield will be murderous. Yeah. Yeah. When your elites feel that they're losing grasp of, losing control of the system, of the game, they'll try and hit the reset button. Oh, the Great Reset. The Great Reset is like the Great Reset is like the most obvious sales pitch to aristocrats and elites in history. We're gonna reset the whole game because people are getting a little too wise to the scam. Right? Bobby Kennedy Jr., one of them. But let's see if Biden can even get through the primary against Bobby Kennedy, let alone him become the candidate and have to go against Donald Trump with a 30% approval rating. My goodness, a 30% approval rating? He can't possibly hope to win. Mathematically, he cannot hope to win. If he comes through the primary, let's make this clear. If Joe Biden makes it through the primary, the Democrats will have chosen to vote for the old guard of their own side of the political apparatus, rather than be competitive against Donald Trump, because there's no way Joe Biden can be competitive against Donald Trump this time unless they cheat. Unless they cheat. And coming, in the next 6 months, all of the thought leaders, all of the strategists on the conservative side of the movement have to get together and put our heads together in terms of our election strategy and how to really best go about uh, making the election as secure or as accountable as we possibly can. But ultimately, with technology, they're way out in front of us in this regard as well. But I'll tell you this, cheaters never prosper. Cheaters never prosper. And when you cheat the system, when you cheat to win, people feel cheated. Even if they don't recognize it in the immediate moment, they feel cheated, and it creates a moral hazard that you got to deal with down the road. And so if Joe Biden with a 30% approval rating somehow gets 90 million votes and beats Donald Trump, whose rhetoric is aging as well as any public figure in recent memory. I mean, his rhetoric is just aging so well, and it's resonating with the black community greatly. Oh, the black community's they're fed up with Democrats. They're especially fed up with Joe Biden, and more each day they're going, man, we might have been better off with big Trump in office. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, yeah, I think that's pretty that's pretty logical of you. Yeah, you would be a lot better off with Trump in office. And they haven't even begun to really sort through the level. I mean, when black people in this country, when black men in this country really figure out the depth of the skullduggery that's going on in their name, on behalf of them, waged against them in their own name, with themselves as the hallmark, with themselves as the poster child of the scam. Oh, the retribution is coming fast and swift. And it's not gonna be violent. I would pray it's not violent, but it's gonna be definite. It's gonna be definite. It's gonna resonate. It's gonna be around for a long time. When they actually, as they slowly but surely start to figure out this scam, this sort of effeminate LGBTQ Marxist radical materialist, big government, big tech, global elite game. Once they really figure it out and they say no, the op the power brokers are going to get desperate. They're going to get desperate and they're going to try and kill you. I mean, duh, of course. I mean, what they're really hoping is that you just accept that a lot of people have to die way ahead of time for some reason. I mean, whether it's the eggs and the food production plants just completely going pooey, right? Poof. Egg factory here, cows dying. It's just, all across the country. Our food supply production facilities seem to be under attack from who I don't know. From who I don't know. I don't know. But I know one thing. If one of you broke into Nancy Pelosi's house with a hammer, they would know every single detail about it. But the most important food production facilities in this country seem to be completely unsecured. Unsecured. Figure that. I mean, let's just say it's actually true and these are spontaneous attacks on our food supply. Let's just say that. That implies a great deal about what we as in the federal government and politicians who we elect to represent us, what we, the people, feel about our own survival, right? That says a lot about our own charity towards ourselves. Because I guarantee you, the Pelosi's and all your other political elites are very well protected. They're well protected. But your eggs, your essential food needs, the nation's essential food supply, that energy source for this nation's worker bees and drones and slaves and serfs and subjects to continue to work, to produce the energy, to produce the posh, liberal, yuppie, omnisexual lifestyle that our elites live, seem to be totally unprotected. I mean, if you don't know about this, please, just 3 clicks away. The food manufacturing plants all around the country are under attack. Well, maybe there's a plan to replace them with artificial, intelligent food manufacturing plants, automated food manufacturing plants. Maybe they're too old. Maybe you, the workers, even the workers that pretty much just press the buttons on the floor of the automated food plant factory now, maybe that's obsolete. Maybe we're going to go to an AI McDonald's. Again, told you guys a story when I went down to Kansas for a tournament recently, about 3 weeks back. We stopped at a McDonald's and the entire drive-through was automated. I mean, I get pissed off when I call about a household bill, right? A utilities bill, and I got to go through a bunch of hoops to get on the phone with a person to explain the situation I'm trying to solve in regards to utility bills. I get pissed off at that. We need automated drive-throughs at McDonald's. I mean, imagine if you have a peanut allergy. I know they don't have peanuts at McDonald's, but just in general, I mean, imagine you're allergic to tomatoes. I mean, the liability alone seems like it would be enough to not have the automated service. I mean, I know when I call Sprint, for example, and say, um, speak with a representative. I think I got pretty clear, articulate diction. I would like to speak with a representative. and and Sprint goes, I'm sorry, you have to pick from one of these options here. Our options are limited, and you have to pick from one of these options. It just horrifies me. It's a predicate. It's just like a suppository of what the world's going to be like when 1984 comes to fruition. And it's already it's already come to fruition for the most part, but there's still hope because there's still Christians and there's still God and there's still faith and there's still some resemblance of sacred honor, and people are going to stand up and fight back. And as we stand up to fight back, the desperation of the enemy is going to grow. The desperation is going to grow, and you're going to see a Hail Mary. I tell all my friends, Alex, Steve, Jason, pick one. Carry all of them. Get ready. The Hail Mary's coming. The Hail Mary is coming. You can pray, you can hope for others, you can do whatever you want to. It doesn't much make any difference to me. The Hail Mary is coming. They're going to throw a Hail Mary because they have to throw a Hail Mary. Because the one problem with their system is that they actually can't provide enough of what they've promised to the people in order to sustain the game. That's what the whole game is really about. That's why you got to eat the bugs. Because we promised you all a luxurious and prosperous welfare state where you can live like your own little king, your own little God, and in your own little world. But now that vision is gone. That vision is radically changed. Now the vision is you're going to live in a line city. You're going to live in a 15-minute line city. And it's going to be barricaded off from the rest of the world. Well, you won't be able to tell whether the fences are to keep the people from outside out or to keep you in. That's what's coming, where you can't tell whether the fences are defensive or offensive, whether they're a defense or whether they're an imprisonment. And by that time, they're hoping that you won't even ask questions because the convenience will be so good. Why ask? Life is great. This is great. Right? We have everything we need. This is awesome. That's what they want. That's what they want to try and provide. You got to kill a lot of people to pull that off because number one, first of all, there's a lot of people. There are a lot of people in the world. I don't care what. I mean, not relative to the land, not relative to the resources. That's a lie. That's a fugazi. That's an EPA. That's a Nixon and Kissinger EPA scam of biblical proportions. That the earth is too small, it's too finite to service the growing population. It's like you can't get any more anti-God than that. It's like, no, you don't have everything you need. The earth is too small. No, the earth isn't too small, but there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people for any select group of individuals to control indefinitely. Yeah, that's hard. That's hard to do. It's hard to do. There's a lot of people. You ever been one person trying to get 4 kids to settle down at night? One person trying to get 4 kids to settle down. Now, corporal punishment is a way that you can do it if need be. If push comes to shove. Now imagine 4 adults. Okay, now imagine 40 adults. Now imagine 40,000 adults. Now imagine 4 million adults. Now imagine 4 billion adults. The only way to control 4 billion adults is to divide, conquer, compartmentalize, truncate, and keep them busy. That's the only way to control 4 billion adults. And in order to do it, there has to be some type of a social contract, which there is. I hate people who say there is no social contract. Oh, you are the 401k, 501c3 sellouts that make it seem like the tax exempt status and your pension fund aren't a way that you're in on the scam. And yes, you are. Yes, you absolutely are. Yes, you absolutely are. And I'm not speaking out against going to church, and I'm not speaking out against having a retirement plan or investment, but at what cost? At what cost? Right? Because now the cost is going to be thrust upon you. Now the cost is going to be called in. You're going to be called on that cost. That cost is going to be presented and put in front of you, you know, like a carrot. And if you're not wise, if you don't have that discernment, if you don't have that faith, if you don't seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, that's what I wrote on my head, on the side of my head, the day that my son and I walked out on the court with the Jesus King shirt. If you look in that video, this is what I forgot to say earlier. If you look in that video, you can see me turn my head and look at my son, and on the left side of my head, it says Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, not your own, His. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Well, we need to seek that kingdom now. We need to seek that righteousness now. And they're going to dangle a carrot in front of us, and they're going to say, remember how great things were? Remember how good things were? Remember how good they were before the pandemic? Remember how good they were before we were at war with Russia or China? Remember how good they were before we were at war with artificial intelligence? Remember how good everything was? And at that moment, we need leadership that can guide us not into a return of the corrupt status quo, not to a return of an old corrupt status quo, but to a new horizon, to a new beginning with the best of what we were. Yeah, that's possible. I think that's what Donald Trump means when he says, make America great again. Think about how profound this statement is. Make America great again. Well, in order to even understand it, you have to understand what America was meant to be, what America is in its foundations. And not to absolve America of any of its sins, because only God can absolve, and God can destroy whole nations. There are whole nations that will fall, there are whole nations that will be judged. So I'm not trying to absolve America of any of its sins, but like I and Maj Toure said on our podcast together, that was episode 35, we're not trying to burn the flag, let's clean the flag. Let's repent. And I think that's what Donald Trump is saying when he says, make America great again. It's not let's go back to slavery. Come on, stop. Guys, give me a break. It's not let's go before the civil rights movement where we had segregation. Come on, stop. Stop it. All you celebrity bourgeois black folks used to love Donald Trump. You still love Donald Trump secretly. You just can't say it in front of your posh, yuppie, white liberal, omnisexual friends. You all used to love Donald Trump. You couldn't wait to have Donald Trump in your music video, or have Donald Trump in your lyrics, or have Donald Trump on your show, or have Donald Trump to your house, or have Donald Trump in your, in the picture, or whatever the case may be. You couldn't wait. You couldn't wait to be seen with Donald Trump. Now all of a sudden you're posh, yuppie, liberal, omnisexuals don't like Donald Trump because he tried to push back against the status quo, and now you're anti-Donald Trump. Come on. Who do you think I am? Who do you think I am? That's what he means when he says make America great again. Yes, in this nation's history, we have some dark some dark and deep wounds, but in it is hope. In there is hope. In those wounds, in those foundations, in that history are some of the most brilliant and brightest ideas and philosophies in the entire history of human civilization. And that's what we can draw upon. That's what we can build upon. It's right there for us. We, the people, we will decide. We will decide. But first, we got to get clear about the dangers of our time, the real dangers of our time. And there's no danger greater than artificial intelligence. And it may seem convenient. It may seem like an obvious answer. It may seem like an obvious remedy. That's what it's intended to do. And it's also intended to bastardize our creativity. Let's talk about that part. Let's talk about the war on creativity and how creativity, human creativity, is divinely inspired, if not divine itself. Right? As the Old Testament goes, the Jews, the human beings, were put here to finish, to complete creation. We have the power of creation. We have the power, the fundamental power to affect reality itself. Well, as artificial intelligence grows, we're going to lose that gift. Why would I paint when I can just have somebody else paint? Or why would I teach my child when I can just have someone else teach? And then all of a sudden it's going, well, why would I make music? Or why would we write? Or why would we read? Or why would we do anything? That's what your Yuval Noah Hararis are really saying. As artificial intelligence becomes better, these people are going to become radically bored. They're not going to have anything to do because machines will do it 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times better. And when that day comes, what are we going to do with all these people? What are we going to do with all these people? We're going to have to hook them up to a video game. We're going to have to give them drugs. We're going to have to keep them drugged up and on video games. People, that's a prison. That's a form of slavery. We are at the end of the modern age of slavery. Your first slavery was bondage. Your next era of slavery was wage slaves. And now we're going into digital, artificial intelligence slavery. This has been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio, powered by TireGet.com. Support the alternative economy, the patriot economy, the parallel economy. I don't know what you want to call it. Support companies that support having a country, that believe in having a country, that believe in the truth, that believe in God, that believe in freedom. Support those companies. TireGet is one of those. I'm your host, Royce White, live from the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. We appreciate your viewership and listenership today and in the future. And as always, Godspeed.